possibly rule out a prisoner transfer when in fact no ruling was required of him? And can he advise us whether in fact his admissions on this matter have ever been advised to him to be incompetent by his advisers?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, they have never been advised to me as being incompetent. My ruling out of the prisoner transfer was quite clear. It was on the basis that I felt it to be entirely inappropriate. It was quite clear to me that the Americans had either received or had an expectation that they had received clear information prior to trial that Mr Al Megrahi would serve his sentence in Scotland, and as I say, it was on that basis that I made my decision.
Question Carlo, followed by David Whitten.
One of the more preposterous consequences of the Cabinet Secretary's decision, and one which has been met with dismay by the local community, is the responsibility which now falls upon East Renfrewshire Council to be responsible for the wherewithal and whereabouts of Mr Al Megrahi. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm what conversations he has had with East Renfrewshire Council, and whether during those he explained to them the arrangements he has put in place to recall Mr Al Megrahi to custody should that prove to be necessary?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Mr Carlo will be aware, we do not operate criminal justice social work directly from St Andrew's House. It was for that reason that it was East Renfrewshire Social Work Department who became responsible. Officials have been in discussion with them, because clearly it is appropriate that there should be these discussions at official level, and clearly requirements required to be laid down for the terms and conditions of the licence that Mr Al Megrahi required to sign. As I say, I will be happy to be kept advised, and I doubtless will be if there are problems. But the fact of the matter is that the guidance in the laws prescribe that it has to be East Renfrewshire Council. There is no alternative. That is what is laid down by the due process that I followed, and as I say, we sought thereafter to ensure that appropriate conditions would be in place regarding place of residency, limitations on travel, other matters that were appropriate not only in Scotland, but also taking into account the peculiar and unique circumstances relating to this case.
David Whitten, followed by James Stone.
Presiding Officer, as someone who was in Lockerbie as part of the STV reporting team the day after Pan Am 103 was brought down, I saw at first hand the full effects of that atrocity. It's something I'll certainly never forget. The Cabinet Secretary says that he didn't take his final decision until after August the 14th, yet the BBC were able to report exactly what he'd do days beforehand, something they would not have done unless they were absolutely sure of their facts. On the morning of his decision...
Come to a question, please.
Indeed. The Herald also reported his decision hours before he made it. The Cabinet Secretary has been asked 3 times now whether he would order a leak inquiry. So can I ask again, will he do so? Because somebody has been leaking information, and it was either the Minister himself or it was his press advisers, and that showed little sensitivity to the relatives of those who died.
Cabinet Secretary.
Perhaps I could remind Presiding Officer Mr Whitten of the timeline. The application for compassionate release came in on the 24th of July. The medical report I received from the Director of Health and Social Care in the Scottish Prison Service was dated the 10th of August. The final submissions I received from my officials were late on the 14th of August. I made my decision on the 19th of August, and I made a full statement on the 20th of August. And as I said in response to previous questions, Mr Whitten, there has been a variety of speculation on this. Some papers speculated that I was going to refuse compassionate release. Many institutions speculated I was going to make compassionate release, and the Sunday Post speculated that they knew all this 4 weeks ago. I can only go by what, as I said, I have stated. I have narrated the timeline, I took due process, and I followed that.
I'm sorry, I was misinformed about Mr Stone, so I called Dr Richard Simpson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So, as a former associate member of the British Association of Urological Surgeons, I'm really interested in the health grounds. I understand that the guidance from the SBS is that death should take place or be seen to probably take place within 3 months. The medical reports which I have read indicate that in July the lower end of the previous expectations were to be looked at, and that means that Mr Al Megrahi in July was expected to survive for 8 months till April 2010, and all medical advisers have said the prognosis is really very difficult to determine. So the 3 months rule is highly questionable in this case. I would ask him, therefore, who he took advice from other than a consultant urologist and the prison medical officer. Did he take any advice from a palliative care expert who would have a greater understanding of the possibilities around this? Because if Mr Megrahi lives for much longer than the 3 months, this will add to the insult to American families and others.
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I say, Presiding Officer, to Dr Simpson that I followed the 3-month rule. That was the medical information given to me. The medical report that came from the Director of Health and Social Care from the Scottish Prison Service was dated 10th August. That was based upon an interview and indeed an examination of Mr Al Megrahi on the 3rd of August, when it was made quite clear that there had been a change for the worse in his circumstances. I do not have the benefit of Dr Simpson's training in medicine or indeed in psychiatry, but I do follow the rules and guidance that are laid down for Cabinet Secretaries for Justice. I do recall that Dr Simpson has also served as a Minister for Justice. I followed the same rules and regulations that he would have been required to do so had it come before him.
I must ask members now to be extremely brief because we are getting very short time. Angela Constance will be followed by Lewis MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. There have been countless reports in the media and indeed comments from members of this Parliament concerning the availability of information on this case prior to the announcement last week. Can the Cabinet Secretary therefore once again confirm, in order to bring an end to these baseless accusations, when the medical report and other reports from parole, prison governor and social work on which his decision was based, when these reports were received and the timescale in which the decisions were based?
Again, as briefly as possible.
Well, as I indicated, I received the full and final submissions on the 14th of August, late on, and I made my decision on the 19th.
Lewis MacDonald, followed by Ken McIntosh.
Did the Cabinet Secretary discuss any of the potential economic impacts arising from his decision prior to its announcement, either with Cabinet colleagues or with anyone out with the Scottish Government?
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely not.
Ken McIntosh, followed by Anne McLaughlin.
As the Presiding Officer may be aware, it falls on the local authority representing my own constituency of East Renfrewshire to monitor Mr Megrahi under the terms of his release. It is also my understanding that the Scottish Government have only insisted that Mr Megrahi attend a video conference once a month. A video conference once a month. May I ask the Scottish Government what action it will take if Mr Megrahi fails to show up for his monthly appearance?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, on the basis of the medical evidence given to me, I have returned him to Libya to die.
Anne McLaughlin, followed by Malcolm Chisholm.
The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that a UK Tory MP, Daniel Kaczynski, has suggested that basing this decision on judicial grounds was throwing away a bargaining chip. Will he join with me in condemning these comments as utterly inappropriate? And would he urge all other politicians in this chamber to reject such ideas?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the laws I followed are the laws laid down by previous administrations, some under a Tory administration south of the border and some under a Liberal Labour administration within the Scottish Parliament. I followed due process. I hope and believe that everybody who is given the privilege to serve in this position before me or following me, of whatever political party, would follow that and would do so without consideration on political, economic or diplomatic grounds.
Malcolm Chisholm, followed by Karen Gillan.
Can I regret the politicisation of what is a quasi-judicial matter, and for my part commend the Justice Secretary for a courageous decision which is entirely consistent with both the principles of Scots law and Christian morality, as evidenced by the widespread support of churches across Scotland. Does he share my revulsion, however, at what happened when Al Megrahi returned to Libya, but does he accept that there is nothing that anyone in this Parliament could have done to stop that, and does he also agree that it is entirely irrelevant to the rights or wrongs of the original decision?
Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to Malcolm Chisholm, and I am glad that we share the same beliefs and values and that they transcend whatever political affiliations we have. He is quite right. It was deeply regrettable what took place. Mr Al Megrahi acted without compassion and he showed no sensitivity. But as I say, our values are deeper and different.
Karen Gillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, I am sure you will not suggest that you have a monopoly on beliefs and values, and as a Christian myself, I do not share your position. However, I think we are both entitled to that position. You have indicated today that cost is not a factor in the Scottish justice system. Can I therefore ask you again specifically which alternative compassionate release options you considered,